Deven, having you here this evening as the headliner for this has filled the room with elected officials. If I were to mention all the honorable people here in the attendance tonight, we would never get to our keynote. So I will thank each of you for being here this evening. And I will ask this. For those of you who this is your first MWDOC policy dinner, would you please stand? John Rubin, up, East Orange County. Up, there we go. Thank you over here from a little El Toro action. Ah, there he is. Yorbas. Thank you. Thank you for taking time in your life to join us, and we hope that this is the first of many. But this is the time for you to get to know one another at your tables, talk about whatever you want to. But before dinner is served, I do want to ask you to join me in recognition of our board. I'm going to mention their names and ask them to stand. The MWDOC board tonight is Al Netterhoods, Carl Seckel, so many years, I want to say Randy Record, Randy Crane, immediate past president Megan U. Schneider. Thank you for your leadership. So if you'll join me in welcoming this gentleman, I want you to know that you should know a couple of things. One of them is Jeff Keitlinger said, if you want to work a deal with Deven, do not settle it on the tennis court. If you want to see something funny, at least in his mind, take a look at some of the management skills in people today. You'll see people that say, I don't want to have a gun in my house, so they don't think they should sell guns. You'll find people who say, I am a vegetarian, so they don't think that the restaurant should serve steak. Deven is a vegetarian. He feels like you can have steak if you want it. I tell you that story because that's the way he is leading Metropolitan. He has very firm ideas, very strong opinions, but he's willing to share them with you if you ask, and he is willing to share yours if you'll offer it. That perspective, that talent, that gift is really important, and we're really delighted that we have him with us. Deven's journey with Metropolitan began in 1995 as a resource specialist. And as many of you know, and if you don't, you're going to know now, he took a little detour when we recruited him to MWDOC in 2005. In 2008, doggone it, he escaped and went back to Met, where after working on Waller policy, we'd burnished him up enough that he returned to Met, climbed to group manager for water resources, then assistant GM, chief operating officer, and now he's running the show. He oversaw operations, engineering, planning, and more, bringing the board's vision to life. He's got his bachelor's degree in economics from Cal State Fullerton. Go Titans. A master's in public administration and a love for Angels baseball. And just in case you're wondering if there's still a little bit of the kid at heart, talk to him about a day at Disneyland. He's a special guy. We're thrilled to have him with us. So Deven, come on up.
Thank you so much, Larry. Can y'all hear me? Orange County, it is fantastic to be here with you tonight. It's hard for me to believe, and I really come to terms with the fact that an old Orange County kid can actually be the GM of Metropolitan Water District. I don't know exactly how that happened, but even more so, how I could be invited to an event like this with all of you. I remember years ago, I used to help plan and put this event on. And so it's just such a wonderful honor to be here with you tonight, and even more of an honor to be introduced by Larry. Larry, thank you very much. When I say that I'm an Orange County kid, what I mean is that I was actually born at St. Joseph's over in Orange. I went to high school at El Dorado High School. I am a Golden Hawk. from Placentia. Come on now. We are an Orange County crew, aren't we? My first job, actually one of my first jobs, was at the house that the mouse built as a Jungle Cruise captain at Disneyland. I went on and got my bachelor's degree from Cal State Fullerton. That's true, I am a Titan. My first home was in Brea. We later settled in Placentia. I do root for the Angels. The Angels I root for are the California Angels, not the LA Angels of... Congratulations, Joe. And it was great to work with you. As we start off tonight, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about a number of things. But I do want to reflect on what we experienced just a few months ago. And we are a water community. Everybody in this room works together. So many of you have had a positive influence on me in my career. But the fact is that we come together in times of need. And what you see on the graphic here is the impact of the Eaton fire in the Altadena, Pasadena area. It was very, very challenging. And you can see the percentage of connections that were destroyed in some of the areas in Altadena. And it's not really to focus on the negative. The fact is that it could have been a lot worse than it was. But part of the team that helped respond, Metropolitan Water District, we were boots on the ground helping so many firefighters, the local water districts, the mutual water companies. But here in the middle, you see Cal Warren. The head of Cal Warren is one of your own, Vicki Osborne. Vicki runs water emergency response from Orange County. You all know this, and I have to tell you that so much of emergency response is the direct communication, making sure that people know how to get resources, the connection between agencies that have the resources to be able to help out. And I do want to honor and reflect the fact that your We Rock response is the class in the industry. It's a fantastic thing that Orange County has done. It is a model for what other counties need to do. And I do want to thank Vicki for all of her effort and the work that she did. So let's give her another round of applause. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that I see in the water industry, particularly in Southern California, and the things that Metropolitan needs to do going forward. I do want to reflect on the partnership that we have with Municipal Water District of Orange County. They've been fantastic leaders and engaged in the discussion on where we need to go at Metropolitan. But before that, we're going to do a little bit of traveling together. So we're going to go back about 8 years. This is 2017, and I had the fortunate circumstance of going to this facility. If you take a look here, this is the intake for seawater that's being pumped into a major ocean water desalination plant. I'm going to turn around shortly and show you where that seawater is moving in, but it's about 3 kilometers from the shoreline. The water moves into 2 major buildings and goes through the desalination process. This is gigantic. I was pointing there off to the left to the second building. 39,000 parts per million is the salinity of this water. This is what's known as the Torrevieja desalination facility. It's just outside of Alicante in southern Spain, on the coast of southern Spain. Tough to see this image, but you see that hall on the left, gigantic hall with all of the RO process there, and that's one of 2. It's the largest seawater facility in Europe, and it's the second largest in the world. It's about a quarter larger than the facility that we've got down in Carlsbad. We pride ourselves on work ethic in the United States. In fact, amongst the industrial nations, our work week is longer than any other industrial country. We work hard, we pride ourselves on ingenuity. This plant was built by a culture that takes naps for 2 hours in the afternoon every day. We're doing something wrong. I like that culture too, but my point here is I think that we've lost the sense of imperative. When we put our minds to it, we get things done. We're capable of getting things done. It's really the lack of will that's holding us back. We're going to watch a little bit of a video. Some of you may have seen this. It's about 10 minutes long. We're only going to watch a couple minutes of it. Picture yourself in the 1930s in a movie theater. Our two friends have been traversing across the desert and they need water. And they've come to the watering hole that they expect to see water in, and this is what happens.
Months ago, that hole was full of good, clean water.
You have just witnessed a tragedy of the desert. This same tragedy has occurred many times in the history of man. The moral to be gained by it must be learned, for we here in Southern California are face to face with a water problem, while lacking the dramatic element is far more serious because it affects the lives and property of every man, woman, and child in this region. All Southern California was at one time a desert waste, such as you see here. We have reclaimed this desert, and now we have in its place this growing empire. But the desert is ever around us, waiting and eager to take back what was once its own. And it will take it back unless we bring in more water. For thousands of years, nature had been accumulating the rainfall in Southern California and storing it underground. Then came the white man, and he began to use this underground water. At that time, there was an artesian well belt in Southern California underlying 315 square miles. As Southern California developed, its water requirements increased, and we were soon using more water than was being replaced by nature. Each succeeding year, this overdraft has become larger and larger until now we are forced to pump from depths of 120 to 200 feet. And today, we're withdrawing from our reserve supply each day 170 million gallons more water than is being replaced by nature or man. This tremendous overdraft is rapidly exhausting our underground water reserves. And unless we take immediate steps to bring in water from an outside source, the people of Southern California will be up against a serious water shortage. But we're fortunate in having within our reach a water source capable of supplying our needs. This source is the Colorado River. Our problem, therefore, resolves itself into the task of building an aqueduct or water supply line to bring to us the water we so urgently need. This is the task now being carried forward by the Metropolitan Water District of Southern organization composed of a number of cities that have joined together to solve this problem. This map shows the Colorado River.
How many of you have seen that before? Wow, I would have thought a few more. Is there any lack of conviction in his words? I mean, bound and determined, there's no lack of imperative there. I think that looking at that history shows us a path forward, but it also represents a challenge for us. When you see this graphic, this is the way that Metropolitan built our system. The revenues that we used to build it. We started out because we didn't have any water to deliver as we're building this system, wholly focused on generating revenues through taxes. And over time, we made additional commitments because growth was outstripping, as you heard in Chairman Whitsitt's words, growth was outstripping the supplies that we had available. We made additional commitments to the State Water Project in the 60s, then later on to our local resources programs, the efficiency investments over time. We realized that as we were generating more water and selling that water, that would be an incredible flywheel of revenue. And so we shift over time to focus our revenue stream on water deliveries and water sales. And to the right side of this graphic, you see that we got to a point where about 15% of our revenues were these fixed sources, and 85% of those revenues were volumetric. And we're a little bit higher than that now. But incredible growth, driving revenue growth that allowed us to do amazing things. This is what our demands in Southern California have looked like, just the water that is used in all of our service area over time. Over this roughly, 25-year period, we saw water demands grow by 45%, all the way up to 2007 timeframe. I started in the water industry at Metropolitan right after the big dip that you see there in the mid-1990s. It was an incredible time at Metropolitan. Far from the Whitsitt days, but we were driven by that imperative. I was in a group that was looking at what were the investments that we need to make to ensure that Southern California would be reliable. And you can see with the growth in demand over that time frame, just about a little bit more than 10 years, like 12 years, we invested in upgrades to our treatment facilities. We invested in the crown jewel of water storage, the largest water storage in Southern California, Diamond Valley Lake. We invested in a major tunnel to bring State Water Project supplies to that lake and inland feeder. We moved primary disinfection at all of our treatment plants from chlorine to ozone. If you add all this up, it was more than $5 billion in investment in about a 12-year period. Now, the right side of this graphic, from 2000 to 2007 timeframe, do you know what our rate increases were? 0. We didn't raise our rates during those last 6 years at all because of that flywheel of revenue generation based on the water demands and the deliveries. These investments have paid off. This is just one example. All of the other investments aside, if you take a look at our storage portfolio, every time you see a drop in the storage on this graphic, it's because we're using that water, we're feeding Southern California with it. So it's been an incredible payoff, but we're still worried about reliability. Why is that? Well, if you take a look at the demands, we've seen a powerful shift. Since 2006, 2007 timeframe, we've had a pretty steady trend. This isn't Metropolitan sales. This is reflective of all of your sales from that time period. Major inflection point. I'm going to show you a number of things on this next graphic, but I'm an economist, so the economist belief here is that part of the inflection point was a serious geopolitical issue that happened in the 2006 to 2008 timeframe. You all remember what that is? What was that? Yeah. Major housing bubble, plummeting, cratering of the housing market. We end up losing Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, financial crisis. Some areas actually still haven't rebounded from that hit. It also coincides with a drought sequence. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So a whole series of things happening over time, but fundamental change in terms of the demand trend in Southern California that has affected things for us. So why are we concerned about reliability? Well, the nature of the problem has fundamentally changed. It's no longer growth outstripping supplies that is the challenge for us. This is a shameless plug for our planning process, our Camp for Water, Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water. This is the process that we're using. It's sort of replaced the integrated resources plan that we used to do, where we're trying to sort through how are we going to stay reliable in the face of this change that we're talking about. So let's start to look at this. It isn't growth outstripping supplies anymore. Our demands going forward, most of the scenarios show that they'll be relatively flat. Maybe a little bit of uptick, but relatively flat. The nature of the problem is erosion in the supplies that we have available to us. The graphic that you see here is the first of the two sections of supply that Metropolitan manages that I want to talk to you about. This is the State Water Project. And if you look on the left side of the graphic, the amount that on average the state thought the project could produce was about a 75% allocation. I didn't go earlier in time on this graphic because it had stayed flat for many years. And now you can see what's happened. Coinciding with that geopolitical event we talked about, do you remember what happened in 2006 that matched up in that time frame? Electrical industry, that was one of them. The one I'm thinking about on the State Water Project was a judge named Oliver Wanger that threw out the biological opinions for the State Water Project operations. Immediately, the very next reliability report that they produced shows a major drop in the reliability of the State Water Project, and it has continued. It stayed flat for a period of time, but then it's continued since then. To give you a sense of the loss of supply on the State Water Project, just in this graphic over this period, Metropolitan's share of that is equivalent to Orange County's GWRS program, the Carlsbad Seawater Desalination Facility, and the Pure Water Southern California program at full built out when it gets online, all together. That's what I mean by having to offset erosion of supply. Why is this happening? Is it going to continue going forward? This is one sense of the way the State Water Project operates. You see the runoff that is available to the State Water Project. This is a typical pattern from the 2020 time period. You're all very familiar with this. You accumulate snowpack through the winter time, and then you see the higher runoff as it starts to melt in the early spring. And then in the summer, it really, really tapers off. The interesting thing is that the regulatory environment is such that the summertime is when you can pump most freely. This is a sense of what the state thinks the future holds for runoff going out to 2070. Interestingly, the actual amount of runoff is projected to be about the same. It's not like we're going to be losing the amount of runoff, but can you imagine that the highest runoff month will actually be January? That's when you'd be seeing the highest flows in the rivers. This is a real challenge for the current operations of the State Water Project because from a regulatory perspective, it moves all of that water into the most constrained period of the year. We can talk about one of the changes we're going to have to make in order to take care of that. The area under the graphic is what's really shifting into that period that will impact us. So what does that mean in terms of reliability of deliveries on the State Water Project? This is going out to 2070, and you see it continue to drop. It used to be that we thought we could count on a 75% State Water Project allocation, and now it's going to be, in the future, less than 50% most of the time. So that's the first area of erosion of supply. I'm not here to convince you about Delta Conveyance. You guys know that's something that we've invested in the planning on for the Delta Conveyance program. But even without Delta Conveyance, we're going to have to invest in the capacity of the canal system on the State Water Project because you're going to want to be able to pump that water when it's available. And in order to pump that water when it's available, the pumps need to be ready and the canal capacity has to be there to be able to move it. And you've probably heard about subsidence. but subsidence has reduced that capacity and we have to restore that capacity. We also have to invest in science efforts and advocacy to have a regulatory environment that doesn't just say this date and you stop pumping. We already know if this is true, runoff patterns are going to change significantly. That's going to change where the fish are, what's good for the fish. You need regulations that account for that are adaptable as we move through time. I also argue that there are in-delta improvements that are super important for us. The idea that salinity intrusion might increase in the future, that would affect our ability to pump. It'll affect species, but if you have barriers that are operable, not rock barriers that you put in once and then you take out later, but truly operable barriers, you can change the nature of salinity in the delta. And finally, we got to get folks at the state and in the delta that live there, that depend on it, to care about the levee system and to care about investing in the levee system themselves. Let's move to the other major area. We were founded for the Colorado River. Who knows what is the allocated supply on the Colorado River? If you add it up, upper basin, lower basin, Mexico, 15 million, 16, 16 and a half. Upper basin is 7.5, lower basin is 7.5. That gets you the 15, and then we've got to deliver 1.5 to Mexico. So that's the 16.5. What you see on this graphic goes all the way back to the beginning of the last century and the runoff on the Colorado River. Those numbers that we just talked about hail from the 1920s. The compact on the river was 1922. And what you see is that the runoff in advance of that period was closer to 18 million acre feet. So at that time, if you're signing a compact, you're thinking, hey, it's not a problem. We can meet these deliveries. But then what you see is a running average that over time has reduced. The running average for this whole period is about 15 million acre feet. And in the yellow, you'll see a line, horizontal line. That horizontal line is set at 13 million. What the Bureau, what the feds believe now is, they call it a stress test that we should plan for, is flows of 13 million on average on the river. So that's part of the erosion that I'm talking about. Some of the global climate models, they kind of agree with that. They say plus or minus, it could be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. So in terms of planning for that, how many of you heard of this concept of a structural deficit? Okay, a few of you. So let's say that the upper basin, just rough justice, has to release from Powell, the second largest reservoir in the United States, half of that obligation. So half of 16.5 million acre feet. That's reasonable. So 8.25 million acre feet every year. The problem with this is if you released 8.25 every year, half of that obligation, the lower half of the system would decline. And why is that? Well, you see the states, you see Arizona, California, and Nevada. That gets you 7.5 million acre feet of apportionment. Then you see Mexico there. So together that gets you 9 million that you'd have to deliver to those needs. And then there's these losses, and the losses have a range to them. But if you add all of that up, it's 9.5 to 9.75 million acre feet. So if you're only delivering half of the compact from Lake Powell, Lake Mead is going to crater. One of the reasons for this is because the compact assumed that there would be inflows from tributaries that are now fully used in Arizona that don't make it to the Colorado River, and they would have helped with this. That's not the way it is right now, and the Supreme Court had a deal to do with that. So this is the structural deficit, somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5. When you hear people talking about it, hopefully that gives you a sense. This isn't an impossible problem to solve. The dashed line is the 13 million. That's our target. We can get there. Let's start off with the blue, dark blue on the bottom. The upper basin isn't using 7.5 million acre feet. They're using 4.5 million acre feet. Let's start there. The next piece, the lower basin in Mexico, we are using 9 million, and up at the top you have the losses. Let's shave that 1.5 million off. 4.5 million. You reduce our uses by 1.5 million. With a little bit of the losses, we can come in less than 13 million acre feet. That creates a sustainable system on the Colorado River. Easy for you to say, Deven, 1.5, where does that come from? This is where it comes from. This is actually the proposal that we're negotiating around on the river right now. In the lower basin, with Mexico, California, Arizona, we will reduce our uses to deal with that structural deficit. If it's anything more than that, we reduce as a system. The upper basin has to contribute also. That's the idea. Some of you might say, you know, California's the senior right. Central Arizona project could go to zero before we have to take any losses. So why would you do that, Deven? Well, this honors the senior right. You can see California has the lowest percentage cut of any state. Then you've got Mexico and Nevada, and the highest cut is Arizona. So it does reflect the priorities in the lower basin. And frankly, if we tried to stick it to Central Arizona project and have them go to zero, that's a path to litigation. And we want a path that doesn't include litigation. Isn't this hard to do? Well, actually, we're already doing it. The use in the lower basin has been managed lower steadily over time. In the left of this graphic, that was when we lost surplus in California. Metropolitan took a reduction in our aqueduct flows, and then we invested, along with others that invested in transfers to rebuild the aqueduct. Then it was flat for quite some time, and now you see reductions that have gone even further. We're now seeing on the right side of this graphic use in the lower basin that's lower than what we need to balance the system. Now the question is, can we simply make that consistent over time? The challenge is, this is what's greased the skids here is federal dollars, right? A whole lot of federal money. So the real question is, can we do this, continue these lower basin reductions without the federal dollars? That's the way this package has to come together. That's the number one item. Next, upper basin is going to want to grow just like we did, but our thinking is, you're at 4.5. When we look at the water uses in the upper basin, there's a lot of work that they can do to become more efficient. So more efficient and fund your growth with the additional efficiency. If you can't do that, if you get to a point where that, you're about at the levels of Southern California, then we'll talk about what we need to do in the upper basin. We're going to need improved storage tools. If you've driven by Lake Mead, I don't know if you know, but a fair amount of that water that's in there has Met's name on it. Every molecule has our name on it. And we're able to pull that water out to be able to manage in the years when we really need it. So we need to expand those tools. This time we might even want to expand it all the way up to Powell. So the upper basin would be able to save water, and in years when they don't have to let it down to the lower basin to meet their commitments, they can put it into this storage tool for the years when they do need it. The last one here is we need to allow exchanges across state lines. Right now, every state unto themselves. It's you do what you do. We won't look in your state boundaries. You don't look in mine. But we know that there can be solid investments across the state lines that can fund new projects, can fund new efficiency. We're in this together, and we need a set of regulations on the river that allow that kind of thing to happen. At the very bottom, this is an important point that I wanted to share with you. If we had this kind of structure, what it would mean for Metropolitan and what you'd see in our aqueduct, many years you'd see an aqueduct that isn't full. But that's the way it is today. But with the tools that we're talking about, we would be able to flex up to a full Colorado River aqueduct in the years when we really need that flow. And that's the kind of flexibility that we're looking for from this system. So those are the two major imported supplies that we manage. The other piece of this is system resiliency. Remember, if you go back to 2020 through 22 and the impacts of that incredible drought that we experienced, we did have supplies that were available. Part of the challenge was that we couldn't move them everywhere in Southern California. We had some portions of our service area that were wholly dependent on state water project supplies. It was very difficult for us to get Colorado or stored water up to them. We've got to follow through with continued investments in our capital program for system resilience. And this is what I wanted to show you, what I mean by that. This is our distribution system, and I know the color isn't great, but if you squint your eyes a little bit, you can see some light blue in the upper left and light blue in the top part on the right. Those are the areas that are dependent on state water project supplies and full of the investments that we're looking at. On the right side of the graphic, you see that green? These are pump-back systems that would allow us to get Colorado River water or water from Diamond Valley Lake all the way up into that state water project dependent zone. Once these are complete, that will no longer be a state water project dependent area. And in those dry years on the state water project, we can get that water all the way up there. This is not a quote unquote pipe dream. We are investing now to do it. You see some examples of what has already been added to our capital program. And I want you to get one sense of one of the projects that we're doing to interconnect this system. So we're doing this in real time right now. We tend to do big infrastructure. That's an important facility because as you're pumping water all the way up into the northern reaches of the Inland Empire from Diamond Valley Lake, if you have a power issue, all that water starts coming back towards your pumping structures, and that's why you need surge control on a system like that. But we're actually doing 4 different projects that will allow that to happen. Just in the next 2 years or so, we're going to complete those projects, and it completely eliminates state water project dependence from one side of our system, and it really results in a much more interconnected system for us. The next piece is a focus on the fact that we are coming up on our 100th anniversary as a district. And that's an incredible milestone to be around for 100 years, but it also means that much of the infrastructure that we are depending on, that we have at Metropolitan, is now 80 to 85 years old. And we're having to reinvest in it just to make it work the way that it was envisioned when we first built it. Our capital program is now moving largely to refurbishment and replacement of that system. And in terms of the staffing at Metropolitan, believe it or not, our staff is about 17% lower than it was at the turn of the century. So we've reduced our headcount quite significantly. But in order to increase the investment in our capital program, we're going to have to reinvest in the staffing at Metropolitan. This is where the discussion starts to get difficult. Budget and rates. I want to talk to you a little bit about what's in store for us from a financial perspective. We're going to need your support to get there. And we'll start with this. Do you guys know who said this? Benjamin Franklin, that's right. When the well's dry, we know the worth of water. Right after 22, in the middle of the drought, everybody met, you've got to invest, get these projects done, get it done as quickly as possible. Where is the pure water? Get DCP done. And 23 happens, it's 100% state water project allocation. Yeah, keep investing, connect the system, get the projects done, maybe get DCP. 24 rolls around, 40% allocation. It's not as high as people would want, but high enough for us to, even under a 40% allocation, still put more water into storage. Storage keeps going up. Keep investing. 25, Here we are at a 35% allocation. We're about in balance. We're probably going to increase storage a little bit, and we expect that the allocation may even go higher, which will allow us to put even more water into storage. And the message about what happened during the drought and why it's so important to keep that sense of imperative just gets harder and harder every year we move away from the calamity. So we know every 2 years we've got to adopt our budget and our rates. The last time we did that last year, we projected a pretty significant increase for this next cycle in 2026. We would go through the process starting in January, we would adopt a budget in the springtime, and then in 27 and in 28, the combined increase across those 2 years would be about 23%. Talked about the staffing and the capital program needs, but this is what we're set up for. There's a whole lot of information on this graphic. My CFO loves this because it communicates everything all at once. But you look at the yellow, 2 8.5, that's where we are right now, and you look right next to it, the follow-on years, 11.5 and 11.5. The second line from the bottom, you might look at that, that's our capital program, and you're gonna say, Deven, you're going from $300 million to $1.3 billion. What the heck are you doing? That is the combined impact of our replacement and refurbishment and investment in the Pure Water Southern California program. I know not everybody believes in it. It is a major new supply that would be inside the fault zone. I see value in that, but let's separate it out. We've got to have a serious discussion about the dark blue on the bottom and what that replacement and refurbishment looks like. That's without Pure Water. What's fading in the background is the Pure Water program up above it. And this is what it looks like without the Pure Water program, if you want to know. So the difference in the rates, instead of 23%, you're closer to 13 or 14%, and then about 4% there on out. We've got to have a serious discussion about how we make this happen to be able to continue to invest in the reliability of the system. This one's interesting because now we combine the notion that we're capable, we know how to do this, we know how to access the revenue streams, but the business model is a business model based on growth. And just a few years ago, the federal government was talking about why isn't more recycled water being done in the United States? And they came to the conclusion that the problems had actually evolved more quickly than the institutions. So let's evolve the institutions. I want to very much thank the team at the Municipal Water District of Orange County for working with us along with many of our member agencies to think about the business model at Metropolitan. We have to change our general approach at Met. And these are just a few areas that we're thinking. This is not board policy yet, but this is the nature of the discussion that's being brought forward for our board to think about. The first one is, remember the graphic that we looked at the very beginning, the revenue stream, fixed cost coverage? There are ways for us to increase our fixed cost coverage. Maybe we can get closer to industry norms that are 30 to 40%, and then the rest is based on the water that we deliver. That's a discussion we're having right now. In our last budget, our board actually asked us, could you set the budget based on a more conservative water sales level for this budget cycle so there isn't the risk that we're going to have to draw down reserves if water sales are lower? So maybe considering a policy going forward that we would plan on more conservative water sales. In fact, the graphics I showed you earlier assumed more conservative levels. We've got tremendous infrastructure throughout our system here in Southern California. Why not take a stab at using that infrastructure to exchange local supplies in Southern California? I hear there are some agencies that feel the future for them is that they'll have more local supply than they need. So maybe we can help out. That would be brand new policy for Metropolitan that we haven't done before. And finally, the fact is that if we pull off these plans, in most years, even with that erosion of some of our supplies, most years we're going to have more water than we need. It's really the driest of years that we're concerned about. This shouldn't be at odds with your guts. You should feel truth in that. What that means is that we can probably have relatively high storage levels and still work with our partners, as an example in the ag industry, that need water almost every year and would be willing to pay for it. And we can use that as a tool to generate revenues that offset the cost that you'd have to pay to Metropolitan. An important tool that our board just approved for us to use in this last budget cycle, and it could be a major key for us in investing and offsetting those costs with revenues from elsewhere when we've got more water than we need in those future years. It will happen. Finally, I just want to emphasize the benefit of the incredible partnership that we've got with our member agency leaders, particularly you all here in Orange County and MWDOC. I have had the wonderful opportunity to travel a lot around the world. Roughly half of my family is on the other side of the world in India. And in that experience, I keep coming back. Orange County, about an hour from incredible mountains, world-class deserts, the best beaches in the world. There isn't a better place to live, and I am so proud to partner with you all to continue it that way going forward and investing in the infrastructure to make it happen. Thank you very much. And before we end, I do want to thank the Metropolitan Board for frankly giving me the opportunity to have the best job in the water industry. Thank you very much. And I'm going to just let you know who's here. Director Dick, thank you. Carl Seckel. Michael Camacho. Fred Jung, I don't know if Fred is here. I don't think he was able to make it. Marty Miller, thank you for coming. Linda Ackerman, Desi Alvarez, Brenda Dinstedt, Juan Garza, Cynthia Kurtz, Tana McCoy, Jackie McMillan. Is there anybody that I missed? I don't. Dennis Erdman. Thank you very much. Oh, I was trying to get off stage.
Well, you know, thank you, Professor. I swear, wouldn't you love to have had a college professor like this guy? That was a great presentation. I think if time allows, we've got time for a couple of questions. You know, that'd be the first time anybody ever said get louder. But we've got some microphones floating around the room if you have time for a couple of questions. I've got some if nobody else does that we were mailed in. So, questions? Or I've got my pocket. I'm ignoring you, Tom.
Men's or women's? I'm going to go with SC and UCLA on the women's side.
Ah, you're a smart lad, aren't you? Okay. Okay, you guys, you don't understand. If you don't raise your hand, I'm going to have to call on Al Netterhood. Al?
Yeah, three questions. Not going to let you get away with it. One. But first, thanks for being here, and thanks for stepping into the breach at Met. Both incredibly valuable. Is that on? Is that on? Okay. So, on the fixed cost side, right now the ad valorem covers less than half of the state water project, about $350 million out of $700 to $800 million. Second, isn't direct potable reuse an expensive pipe dream? Okay, and then the last one is the reverse cyclic program seems like a 5-year bomb waiting to go off. Taking from the future to survive the present. So if you could address each of those, I'd appreciate it.
Wow. And you threw the word bomb going off in there too. That's impressive. I'm not sure the question on the ad valorem, you make an accurate observation that the ad valorem does not cover the full cost of the State Water project. I would say I think what the Metropolitan Board did just in the last budget cycle to double the ad valorem was quite remarkable. It was a huge step to improve the financial resilience of Metropolitan. And just a few years ago, I wouldn't have thought that that was really possible. I also think that it would be pretty difficult to immediately go back to that well. I know that there was a lot of thought and kind of balance in that decision. There are other ways that we can generate fixed revenues. In fact, the team right now is looking at one example. All of our 5 treatment plants and that capital infrastructure, all the power for the ozone, all the chemicals are on a single volumetric rate. There's no fixed revenue for it. So even just changing that a little bit would generate additional fixed revenue for us that would stabilize things. I don't agree that the reverse cyclic program is a bomb waiting to go off. Another way of thinking about reverse cyclic is the idea that you could have relatively level payments that you make to Metropolitan. When your demands are low, but you've got the cash flow, you give the cash flow to Metropolitan in return for, in a future year, Metropolitan will deliver the water. We would love to have a structure that's like that, that's more stable across the board, and the reverse cyclic program was just one tiny example of the way that that could work. So I think it's actually a very positive thing for us financially, and I think I'm conveniently forgetting your second or third question.
Potable reuse, incredibly expensive to develop it though.
Yeah, conveniently forgetting. No, okay, so it is very expensive. It is one of the backstop technologies. That's why, I mean, I think that if we took treatment to the hilt years ago, we could have been doing potable reuse. We're working on ways to try to figure out how to make it more cost effective. And economy of scale at Metropolitan speaks to us partnering on the Pure Water Southern California program. I don't think you have to do it all at once. And in fact, one of the things that we're really looking at is, can you phase that program over time so it becomes an adaptability measure? Maybe you take a baby step, and then if you really need to expand the program in the future, you're already ready to go. This is not dissimilar to what the poster child for projects like this already did with the OCWD GWS project. So I don't think it's a pipe dream, and in fact, I think it's a real opportunity, but I don't discount the costs associated with it. And the way that we bring down those costs are bringing other partners into that project so we don't have to bear all of the burden of the costs. I think that that's a really viable business model for that project.
We had some call-in questions. They're there, they're face down. Pick one of the 3, pick 2 of the 3. One of them says, send Larry a check.
Is that a question?
No, that was
This presumes that I can read
all right.
this close. Let me pull out my...
I was a pharmacist mate in the Navy. I'm not true. Do you see an opportunity with the new administration for enhancing water deliveries here in California?
You know, there is a benefit to the notion of creative destruction. Sometimes you come in and you think, you know what, it's been this way for a while. Some things are working really well, other things are not working well. We're gonna take a swing at this and then see if we can resurrect it in a way that's better. I do think that there's an element of that. When I take a look at regulations as an example in the state of California, I think some of them are wholly science-based, and there are other ones where our team looks at the science and doesn't understand what the benefit to the species is. These are areas where we can improve as a state. Not just the Central Valley Project for primarily ag benefits, but the State Water Project, which is a meshing of urban and ag. I also think that a administration that cares about infrastructure that provides economic benefits would look at things like what I was talking about, the subsidence on the canals, and want to invest in that. Would look at storage that can capture additional supplies in a constrained window and then release that water when we can use it as something you'd want to invest in for the future. So I think these are opportunities.
No, no.
right.
No.
What are you planning to do about this DEI movement?
That's not my handwriting, but that is my kind of question.
Okay. At Metropolitan, the idea of diversity, the idea of going out and finding the best talent with blinders on, the idea of a meritocracy, the idea of working with small businesses and finding a way to reach out so those businesses have access to contracting opportunities at Metropolitan. It's something that we've been doing for ages, and it's benefited all of us and our ratepayers. We didn't call it DEI at that time. The acronym has changed, but these are actions to encourage a workforce that feels totally engaged, a workforce that is open for the communities that we serve. It's not about quotas, though. It was never about quotas for us. So some of the challenges that people see with the acronym of DEI and the notion that, oh, that means that you've got to force fit, that was never the way it was at Metropolitan. It isn't today, and we don't see that for the future. But the idea of tapping in to the workforce that's out there in a way that some areas might feel more closed and we're open for business with them, that's what we're about. We've been about that for years, even without the DEI acronym, so it's something we support.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up.
Oh,
But knowing the open hearts that are here, they'll let you answer the last question.
I thought I was going to get to a shot of whiskey soon, but okay. Should we sell the Delta Islands with the tunnel not seemingly in the cards?
Maybe you have different cards.
So let's presume that the Delta Tunnel did move forward. One of the differences between the design of it now and where it was when we were buying the islands years ago is the alignment. One of the benefits that we saw when we bought the islands was that it could provide an opportunity with respect to that alignment. In fact, the alignment would go right through where some of the islands that we purchased were. That was one of the reasons why we bought them. That's not the case now. So now we have these assets in the Delta. We've got a lot of opportunity there. One of the opportunities that I think is vitally important for Metropolitan, I mentioned this earlier, is securing levee stability on a pathway such that if there is a major seismic event in the Delta, so it is destroyed, that we can still get fresh water to our pumps. It isn't all the islands. So I do think that we're going to need to take a hard look at, if we invested today, would we keep all of them? Would it just be a couple of them or any of them? I'm not going to pass judgment on the answer on that now, but I do think that we need to walk through that exercise, because if you don't need all of them, then we can liquidate them and there may be better uses for that money. So that's something we intend to do.
Thank you, Deven. Thank you so much.